Hey everyone, synth future here from the attic. As you may have noticed, I've been away for a little while. That's because I joined the Kult. Because apparently that's the hip thing to do these days, is to be in a cult. So I wanted to be in a cult as well. But don't you worry, this is a nice cult. It's a cult of noises and sounds. And I really want you to join my cult. So if you want to, join me in my cult.
So all jokes aside, today we're talking about Dawesome's Kult synthesizer. Now, just to clarify things, Dawesome sent me a copy of this software, so I didn't pay for it. That's why there's a sponsor tag on this video. But they also didn't review this footage, so strap in, Peter, you're in for a bumpy ride. Nah, jokes aside. It's going to be fun, taking a look at Kult. It's a strange attractor based synthesizer, which requires some explanation, but at the same time, maybe sometimes it's best to not know how things work and just enjoy it as it is. So without too much talky bits at this part, let's just dive into the door, let's take a look at Kult and let's see what this is all about.
So this is Kult by Dawesome, and we are going to just go through the entire thing from front to start and talk a little bit about what makes this different than other synthesizers and what are kind of the unique points here. And we start out straight away with something pretty interesting, and that's the actual oscillators that have been implemented here. Now these are based on so-called strange attractors, and that's an object from the mathematical theory of chaos. And that's straight from the manual, because if you actually start to look into strange attractors, it's quite a deep subject and it's quite a lot more involved than I want it to be. And aside, I don't know how they did the 3D to 1D conversion, so I can't say much about how it's actually influencing things, but you will see once we start to play around with it that it creates some pretty interesting and unique kind of sounds. And I think that's sort of a Dawesome staple, is doing things just a little bit different. And that's kind of in a way where you lose your footing. So you need to kind of relearn what you're doing. And I know that for some people, that's something that's kind of a barrier. And if you want something that's straight up out of the box, very familiar and easy to get into, this might not be exactly for you. But at the same time, I think it's a good call, because there's a lot of very same-ish things. And when everything is same-ish, what is the point of it? And I think concepts like these, and it kind of reminds me of Generate by Newfangled Audio in a sense, it tries to do something that is a little bit out there, a little bit unusual, and therefore it kind of invites you to experiment more with making patches instead of just instantly going back to your familiar and safe spaces. So right now it's set to a sinus, because there's also some traditional waveforms in here. So if you play through that, sounds like a sinus. The fun thing here is you can start shaping this waveform here with these first two controls, the saw and the square, so you can make it more saw-like. And I guess to give a little bit more visual feedback, let's just throw an oscilloscope. Or square-like. Of course, you can blend these as well. In this way, we can go from a simple sinus to a more interesting waveform already. Next to that, we get a frequency shifter. which can be synced to the DAW as well. An S shift, which is a unique thing to the synthesizer, but it actually just adds some extra movement. But it doesn't work too well on the sinus and phase shift, of course. So let's move to another waveform. You can just right click it, get to any of the waveforms. And this is one of those things where you just kind of have to go for it, pick something and see how it sounds and see how you can work from there. And there's the kind of casual things like the sinus here. There's a square, another square. There should be a saw somewhere. So the basic waveforms are there, but it's more interesting, that's the saw. So more interesting to just grab something weird. So let's do this one. So that's the base waveform. As you can hear, all of these waveforms are fairly nasty. And to control all this chaos, you are going to need some filters, and luckily they are there to provide some means of cleaning things up a little bit. Two oscillators with phase control in the center, so you can have two. Different sounds. In the oscillator controls, you also get some standard controls, pitch, which can be quantized, fine control, very nice, and you get an FM control. So you can set this pitch to be a fixed frequency, so it doesn't get controlled by your MIDI. And in the FM you can ratio quantize to set the pitch to the ratio, or the FM pitch to the ratio. For this I'm just going to grab something a little bit cleaner. AM as well, so we have an AM amount, an AM ratio, and it can be controlled with an LFO. Foul filter. For this we of course need a little bit more. And unison mode. Up to 5 voices. Good amount of spread. For big stereo unison. With a switchable octave. And this creates a lot of sound per oscillator already. You have 2 of these, so there's a lot of stacking possibilities with just these 2 oscillators. But that's not enough. We also get a bunch of filter options here. Now the filter is shared across the 2 oscillators, so no per oscillator filter. And the order of filters is from left to right. So you go from distortion, comb, the analog filters, and then another distortion and comb filter, so you can have a distortion before and after if you want to. We have a saturation, an overdrive, and noise. Comb filter. An analog filter with a fair amount of filter options. And then another stage of distortion and comb, so you can have your distortion before and after filter, or both before and after the filter, which is pretty cool. Effects, you can add effects on the side here. You have a few options: reverb, cloud, shimmer, delay, phaser, chorus, and a EQ. Adding is as simple as clicking, and then you get controls down here. To add more effects, you can just click the plus, add a reverb, and now we will have to chain delay into reverb. You can also set these in parallel. Just click this little plus and it will create a parallel lane. And you can set this to a second bus just by clicking the 1 or the 2. So now we have 1 bus for the delay, 1 bus for the reverb. So you can turn down the delay, for instance. Or the reverb. Now one thing that is lacking a little bit here is the option to send the oscillators to specific effects lanes. That would have been really cool if you could say oscillator 1 goes to effect lane 1, oscillator 2 goes to effect lane 2. That's something that other plugins by Dawesome can do. Kult can't do this, so keep that in mind. Let's move to the arpeggiator section. Very important, of course. For us people that are not the best players. You can set the gate here. Pattern. And octaving. you can't draw your own patterns, so you're stuck with these 6 patterns that are included. Fun thing is that you can modulate the pattern parameter, so you can flip between patterns while it's arpeggiating, which is pretty interesting. But we'll get to modulation in a second. We get a main pitch control, which just changes the MIDI input. Pretty standard stuff. A chord mode. Down here you can see what I'm playing, so I'm playing a single note. Getting multiple notes, and this feeds into the arpeggiator as well, so if you're lazy you can just, for instance, do 12, let's do 5, and let's do 8. If you're bonus lazy and you want to have it in a scale, you can just choose scale here. And let Kult manage everything for you, which is quite neat. So let's talk about modulation, which is basically the last part we need to talk about before we get into some sounds. Now, modulation is pretty much the same as all Dawesome stuff, and it's, I think, a very good design, so I'm glad it's here as well. You can simply add modulators on the side, so let's say we want an LFO, you can click the LFO, now with an LFO. If you click on the LFO, you will open the controls of this specific LFO. You can draw in LFOs, you can select LFOs. So let's take a sine wave, bi or unipolar, retrigger control per voice, and you can set it to cycle or one shot. Now if I want to assign this LFO to a parameter, I can just click the parameter I want to assign it to, and then drag this little wheel thing here. Now this parameter has this much modulator going on. If I click another parameter, that will disappear. So that's quite neat. I think this is a pretty neat way to do modulation because it's not very involved. You can quite easily get where you want to be. There's also a mod matrix down here, so every parameter you assign a modulator to. So let's add another LFO. Let's assign that to the F shift, for instance. You can see if you go to the mod tab where these parameters are going. So this LFO goes to oscillator 1 square, and this LFO goes to oscillator 1 F shift. That's quite a neat little way of dealing with modulation. The only downside, I guess, is that you can't see all modulation all in one single view. But at the same time, that could become pretty overwhelming as well. So it's not really the biggest problem at all. So let's dive into some sounds with Kult, and then let's talk a little bit about who this is for and why you should be interested in this.
and there you have it, Kult by Dawesome. Now, Kult is a bit of an oddball synth. And there's a lot of stuff that's pretty traditional and it's all very solid. It has a very solid UI, it has a very solid mod matrix that's very easy to use. It's also very easy to track where routings are, because you can just click the modulations on the side and see where they are going, so it's very neat. And overall it's pretty flexible in a traditional regard. And that's probably not why you are interested in this synthesizer anyways, but it's good to know that at least all those options are there. So if you're not overburdened with a lot of software like I am, this purchase will still give you a lot of that traditional stuff as well. The real interesting part, of course, with Kult is the strange attractor oscillators. Now, I think it was put best by one of my friends who said that niche things are going to sound niche, and I'm going to say, yeah, that's probably pretty accurate. I found when playing with Kult that I wasn't too attracted to these strange attractor oscillators, because they tend to be fairly buzzy and fairly busy. They all have a sort of baked-in modulation, which makes them a bit noisy and a bit twitchy. Again, this is of course by design, and if you're interested in this sort of sound, that is something you would want. On the other hand, you have Generate by Newfangled Audio, which I have mentioned before, where this modulation is more controllable. So you can do slower modulations, which means longer evolutions of your sound, meaning it's a little bit more focused towards being able to do pad-like sounds, where although Kult can do this, it does tend to become quite noisy and quite busy. So for those really long cinematic soundscape things, I would say it's not quite the best fit. Although again, if you mess around with it, I'm pretty sure you can make it work. It's just a bit more work. And one of the weaknesses here, I think, is just that by nature the sounds made by these strange oscillators is just pretty abrasive and busy and stuff. And if that's something that fits within your music creation or within your sound design, this tool is going to do exactly what you need from it. For me, as someone who is more into the clean synths with fuzzy guitar thing, this isn't quite doing it for me. And of course this is extremely personal, and with any synth it's always a personal decision whether or not something is going to fit your workflow or not. Regardless, I had a lot of fun trying out Kult. It's not like it's a bad synthesizer by design. If anything, it's a great synthesizer by design. It just happens to not quite fit what I tend to enjoy in a synthesizer. That being said, I am going to release the presets I've made during my time with Kult. And you can just download those for free if you have Kult and play around with them and see where I ended up with Kult. And I will also upload a video solely focused on some of the sounds of Kult, so you can make this decision yourself, because in the end, whether or not I like something doesn't really matter for if you like it. And that's sort of the point here, is I wanted to try something pretty different, and Kult is pretty different. So I think it was very successful in that regard. I think that's it for this video. If there are any questions, drop them down below. If there's anything you want to see from Kult or from Dawesome, let me know and I will see what I can manage to arrange. For now, that's the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.